Please join me in welcoming our speaker tonight, Tim Hincks.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a genuine honour to be invited by Andrew and by the BAFTA Television Committee to address you. And thank you to you for coming. You're obviously like me, when it's a hot, warm night, you think lecture. So thank you very much for joining me. I want to, over the next 4 to 5 hours, think about creativity. And I want to just be clear about it. I'm talking about creativity for the purpose of tonight across all platforms. I'm not getting obsessed about what television is or isn't, unless you want to go on for 6 or 7 hours. I'm just thinking about it across any screen. Doesn't matter what screen it's on. I'm talking about the creative process that we're all involved in as the world changes. Let's start with a question before we get into the nub of things. What might we be thinking about when we talk about creativity?
I think that people talk about our industry all the time as a creative industry, and they talk about creativity and how important it is. And it absolutely is, but I think people use it in a very throwaway sense, like, I also believe in world peace, but so what? And I think that it's become a bit of a catch-all for people. What I actually believe is that creativity in terms of what we do is a very specific, almost practical thing. It's like a craft.
And what I think it's about is that it's a process. It's where you create something moving, beautiful, engaging, emotional, dramatic. It's a story. It's about that blank sheet of paper and those few people with a real talent to turn that into something with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's something we, as an industry, and in the UK, have become incredibly good at.
It's kind of almost scientific in a weird way, because it's not just ideas. We can all have ideas. I've got ideas for lots of things, but turning that into a piece of content is where the sort of secret sauce. That's the bit that creatives do, and there are not many people who can do that.
Yes, you want passion and you want dreams and you want real belief in what the shows and what the ideas are, but you also want persistence. Rejection is constant in what we do. Rejection has to therefore be turned into an opportunity, as well as something which is frankly deeply, deeply annoying and depressing. Because that's what we're up against, right? We have stories to tell, and we have to persist, and we have to believe in them, and we have to push them.
I decided I was interested in television. I read the Radio Times, the magazine. This is at the very, very beginning. This is about 1990. And I wrote to producers who made these shows, and I wrote about, 30, 40 letters, and I think about 2 came back. And I eventually met this producer who was called Peter Bazalgette, who ran a very small independent television company, and I got a job there as a researcher.
I sat with him and said, I know how to impress this guy. I said, what we need in this company is a political panel show. And he looked at me and said, right, well, you better come up with one. And the kind of penny dropped. I thought, right, we don't just sit here saying, yeah, we'll have a bit of that, and we'll have a bit of this, and we want to be that. You have to create. You have to get into the craft of it. And indeed, I then took that message and I created a political panel show, which is possibly the single worst idea I've ever had in my life, and never made it to the screen. But nonetheless, I got the message. I think I got the message. And it's about that process and about actually being practical about creativity. Secondly, you need brilliant people, right? Well, we all know that. You need brilliant people. But my view is, for a creative organization to thrive, you need it to be competitive, but you also need it to be safe. Having a hit show is the best feeling in the world. The second best feeling in the world, let's face it, is someone else's show failing. Come on. Come on. Come on, let's not pretend. Of course, we say when someone else's show works, it's very good for the genre, it's reinvigorated the genre. I'm so pleased for them, but no, that's not how we're built, nor should we be. It also needs to be a safe environment. Bringing forward an idea, a script, a thought, a concept, is the single most exposing, occasionally scary, nerve-wracking thing you can do, even amongst friends. And to create an environment where creators feel at home and nurtured is an incredibly important part of what that creative process has to be.
Certainly when I was starting in the industry, I felt, well looked after. I felt like the company understood me, but also I felt like I wanted to beat the other people, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I wanted to beat the competitors, I wanted to do the best show, I wanted to get my show on air. And I think there's a sort of strange combination of almost the fragile with the sort of very driven that creative people perhaps have. And I think that's the nub of what we need to hang on to and think about when it comes to creativity. Those people, and getting more of them and encouraging more young people to come in and express their creativity in those ways, that's kind of what excites me. And widening the net of people to come and do what is a wonderful process.
I put it to you that we as an industry have become too insular. We're having far too many conversations with ourselves, we're far too protective over our industry, and we're too narrow. The music industry, when I look at them, are far more comfortable with mainstream content than we are in the TV industry. They're much more comfortable with it. What the music industry doesn't have is kind of guilty pleasures, right? They're equally happy with the niche and the mainstream. They're happy with Ed Sheeran, and they're happy with bands that I probably know. Royal Blood, any advance on Royal Blood, but you name it, niche bands, right? They do both, and they're very comfortable with both. In TV, I think we're in danger of worshipping the niche. I think we've become obsessed with this notion of risk. And we don't, a bit like creativity, don't really know what it means. We all say we've done something risky. Risky show, very risky show. No. I mean, nobody watched it, but very risky, very risky. Good to have covered that area, all right? Now, I put it to you that the mainstream is the riskiest place of all to be. And I would like to think from tonight, we can at least think about, I believe it was Grayson Perry who said, we need to make the mainstream brilliant and the brilliant mainstream. Too often, the popular is seen as a guilty pleasure by our industry in the way that Ed Sheeran is just simply not by the music industry. And too often, regulators, politicians, broadcasters, and producers, very clear about that, and producers, too often, they're snobs. They're snobbish about what we make. They're snobbish about their own content. And I think we almost suffer when people think about our industry, certainly at that level. We suffer from what I'm calling box set tourism. People who think about our industry in terms of the box sets that they watch. Now, I love box sets. Endemol Shine Group makes box sets. I watch them like all of you do. But we are more, as an industry, than just box sets, right? The niche is going to be okay. All the new platforms want niche in a way that helps define them. Where everybody's running a bit scared is the mainstream. It's the mainstream that's in danger.
Because the risk there is total public humiliation and failure. And I think it's a really noble risk to take, if you like, almost, the notion of let's entertain as many people as we possibly can. It's what the music industry is very good at. And I think in television, we have been very good at, in this country, at coming up with those big shows. X Factor is an example, you know, where we've actually defined, and Strictly Come Dancing defined Saturday nights, right? And millions of people watch. I think that's a wonderful thing to do. Why shouldn't we, in entertainment, try and entertain as many people as possible? But it's just got a very bad name.
It's pretty obvious, right? It's not a big surprise. Basically, quality is, very roughly speaking, the stuff that not many people watch, the box sets and so on. And by the way, let me go on. Those are, in my opinion, those are all quality shows. But so are these. Shows watched by millions of people are considered to be low quality. The mainstream is not considered to be quality, and that's a real issue for us. We need to rediscover our love of the mainstream. We need to rediscover our belief in the audience, our belief in what they want and what they love. And we need to get the courage, the Ed Sheeran-like courage of the record companies, to get behind the content and the shows, which will fail big, but that if we don't do that, we are going to lose our way. And so it's a very important point for me that we embrace that mainstream and try and shake off the snobbery that will hold us back. The other way we might think about how we approach the mainstream is in terms of talent, and in terms of how we think about the kind of people that are in our industry and helping us create the next generation of content. We're built on talent. We're very, very bad at bringing on talent. Yeah? We just have an issue with it.
I think the single biggest challenge for our industry is making sure we have the right talent coming in, and in particular that we have the next generation of talent coming into our industry. So we should be looking everywhere for that talent. And what we discover is we're really not looking everywhere in a remotely convincing way. We're very, very narrow in where we get our talent from. And in particular, we're extremely reliant on middle classes, right? We hire middle class people. We're a hideously middle class industry, and we need to cast the net wider, and we need to allow and encourage people from other social backgrounds into our industry.
What I'm talking about is not moral, it's not political. I'm talking about a talent base, right? I'm just coming back to the very basics, that we need to bring as many talents into this industry as we possibly can, and we're hampering ourselves by not fishing in a bigger pool. Now, I think it's pretty clear why this industry might be predominantly middle class, right? It's probably two key areas. Economics. So in particular, Skillset found that around about 50% of people in this industry had done work experience at some point, and that will largely be unpaid.
We know that it's very London-based, which costs a lot of money. Most people don't have the ability to live in London unless they have money from their parents. Secondly, the schemes, the internships, the work experience is quite often unpaid or expenses only. So again, that cuts out huge numbers of people who just think, that's not for me, I can't relate to that, I need to be paid to go, to do a day's work.
The second area is kind of connections or confidence, social connections. Who you know, not what you know, right? Connections. 62%, according to Skillset, of people in this industry got into it via an informal interview, right? So that's almost certainly through people they knew and through connections. Or it's just about being confident, right? And confidence matters a lot in this wonderful but informal industry, right? How you hold yourself, how you project yourself. And not exclusively, but that confidence and that connection is largely the preserve of the middle class, right? That's how it works. That's why we're aspirational. That's why we want to be middle class.
What I really believe is that we should think about social background in the same way we think about other measures of diversity. And so the first thing we need to accept is that we need to come up with an agreed way of measuring it, and we need to monitor that in the same way that other measures of diversity are monitored by broadcasters and producers. So we need to include social background into that mix of measures of diversity.
So let me come up with one measure that I think is a way of measuring it. 7% of people in this country are privately educated. 7%. In our industry, Skillset found that 20% of the indie sector were fee-paying, privately educated, right? So 7% goes to 20%. What I want to think about is how we fish in this bigger pool. I mean, diversity, the diversity agenda isn't anti-white, right? It's just pro-choice, it's pro-more people having access. And this is what I want to put to you. The private school issue is about trying to stop pulling the ladder up. Many of us have moved forward with our lives and become middle class in some cases, and we pulled the ladder up. We're not letting other people in. And that's got to stop. And as I say, it's a very complex thing to measure. You could look at schooling, you look at where you live, you could look at whether you're university educated. There's all sorts of ways of doing this. And so I think we need to do a couple of concrete things. One is, I believe and I propose that Project Diamond, which measures diversity, tracks it with broadcasters and producers and tracks that, how we're doing in diversity, sets targets for social diversity, right? We need to set targets, we need to agree as an industry very quickly, and we need to implement them, and we need to look at how well we're doing. Secondly, I think we need to absolutely change the culture of how we think about it. And I'll just give you a parochial example before moving on. Work experience we talked about. You know, at Endemol Shine Group, for a while now, we've believed that it should be 2 weeks work experience. What we're going to do is we're going to create 40, from September, new work placements, so that's work experience placements, which will no longer just be expenses only. They'll be paid at the London living wage. And in that way, we'll be able to monitor and look at who we're attracting and who's coming into work experience, and hopefully remove, to some extent, some of the financial and economic barriers. And on top of that, we're going to do what you might call sort of offsetting, whereby if an executive producer or producer asks a friend of a friend to come in and do work experience, absolutely fine. But we must match that with someone, always match that with someone who's come in through a non-connected route. So I really want to suggest that we measure social class, we get to grips with it, and we stop, ultimately, what the diversity debate is all about. We stop hiring in our own image. We need to move on from that.
I think there's a really bright future for the television industry. I think the television industry is changing. I think when I say television, I'm talking about all sorts of digital platforms and screens. I'm talking about the opportunities for creative people to get their work in front of as many eyeballs as possible. Traditional television, over the internet, over different digital platforms. It's a really exciting time.
The third area, where I think we need to be more connected, where we need to be less insular, is in how we think about our approach to the world. We make the best television in the world, right? We make the best content. Now, we're certainly very good at saying we make the best content in the world, but I think the world has woken up, right? So content can come from anywhere. By the way, in scripted as well as non-scripted. Shows coming from Spain, from Germany, from Korea. So the world has moved on. And we, as an industry, as a creative industry, need to be match fit, right, to compete. You know, let me be clear, I stand before you with a frank admission. I have been consolidated. Endemol Shine Group have merged, you read the papers, right? Merged, and I'm part of a big international global group. That means I kind of feel the same, kind of look the same, roughly talk the same, and the shows we make and are making feel about the same, whether it's Ripper Street, Peaky Blinders, Broadchurch, Black Mirror. See, I'm giving you all the posh ones, right? It's like at the dinner party. Yeah, good shows. And Snog, Marry, Avoid. They're all consolidated shows, so they feel the same, look the same. So I suppose what I'm rather clumsily hinting at is that I don't believe for a minute that consolidation, foreign ownership, or indeed size or scale means one thing or another for creativity. I think there are some brilliant big companies, I'd hope ours is one, creatively. There are some terrible ones, right? There are also some brilliant small companies and some absolutely shocking ones, and let's name them tonight. No. So it's not about scale or size, right? And it's not about ownership, in my view, from a creative perspective. But I can see often people are skeptical about that. Now, I've been in an international television and content for 15 years. I've been Dutch-owned for 15 years, so I've never thought about it. I'm privileged to have friends and colleagues and creative colleagues around the world, but above all else, and I think I speak for my colleagues as well in the UK, first and foremost, I'm a UK creative, and I work with UK creative teams, and that's where I come from. I mean, if anything, being part of an international group maybe even makes you more of a sense of your own UK identity than otherwise. So yeah, I think foreign investment into creative companies and into independent companies and so on is a genuine boost to our economy, can be a boost to creativity, but is certainly a sign of success. So I say to you, in fact, when we're thinking about our role in the world, beware the UKIPification of British television. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's what I said. I'm so confident I'm going to say it again. Beware the UKIPification of British television. Beware the Little England arguments about the way our creative economy runs. Don't turn back the clock on progress, right? On the progress we've made. And most specifically, help the next generation of UK creatives take on the world.
We also need to embrace the notion of creative entrepreneurship, really. We need the big companies and the small companies to understand that people should be fairly rewarded for what they create. I think to encourage people, to incentivize them. I'm quite comfortable with the commercial and the creative sitting alongside each other. And I really feel that you want to kind of tell people that ours is the industry to be in, that, you know, that they can be well looked after, rewarded, and they can tell their stories. Because after all, what we want is people who just want to tell new and different stories in new and different ways, using technology, using the internet and so on. And we want really to make them feel this is a home, this industry is a home. And I think it can be, but I think we've really got to think, you know, about the future in a more concerted way. And I think we've got to stop being insular and just talking to the same old people all the time, because that's our problem. The same old people having the same old conversations. We need to think a bit more about the next generation coming through, and we need to think about how we make this industry a home for them.
We've talked about the creative challenges ahead. We are extremely good at creativity in this country, and my obsession is about making sure the next generation, on whatever screens that content appears in, are in good health and are protected and are supported. So I hope I've told a story of hope and optimism. I believe we are capable of great, great things together. I believe we need to be less insular as an industry. I believe we need to think about risk and ambition. I believe we need to grapple finally with this big issue of talent and social background. And I think we need to be match fit and take our place to compete with the world. And if we do that, I genuinely, genuinely believe the next 10 years can be even more creatively exciting than the last 10. And I thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
In 2008, I was asked to make a speech at the Royal Television Society. My talk covered the history of ethnic minorities in British television, the story of my own personal journey in the business, and I put forward some suggestions as to how we might make the representation of ethnic minorities a little fairer. At the talk's conclusion, I said, I hope that things will now change and that I don't have to come back and repeat myself in another 5 or 6 years' time.
Probably every successful writer on stage, screen, or prose has been told some version of give up at some point in their career. It's rejection. And if you can't deal with it, if you can't pick yourself up off the floor after someone's completely crushed your soul, and if you can't continue onward, then you probably shouldn't be trying to write for a living.